Eric, Sabrina is in the attendees.
Yep, I just let her in, and
Okay.
Elisa, you can go ahead.
Just,
Okay.
I'm sorry, Elisa, one quick thing. We also have a few directors in the attendees.
Yep, I'll go through it all.
Am I okay to go, or do you want me to wait?
Oh, you can go.
Okay, all righty. Good evening and welcome to the August 24th special board meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Perez, seconded by Shields Cook. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Director Colton, will you please read the purpose statement?
The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential.
Thank you very much. And I will go ahead and read our statement regarding public comments, which will follow our discussion item on the agenda this evening. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school, others will state their name and address. And our discussion item for this evening is school calendar hours. And I'll turn it over to you, Superintendent Reisner.
Sure, thank you so much. We know that there have been a lot of questions at the building level meetings regarding what happens if our phased in plan is not, we don't get granted the permission. And so how would we make up those hours? Would we have to make up those hours? And so we wanted to take a minute to address kind of in a more detailed format than we did at the building level meetings. So we have been working with the union, Scott Ricks, and Eileen Sullivan and Charlene Mason. We met the other day, hammered through a lot of numbers and had great conversations. And I can't say enough about our teachers union and the leaders of that union. They are so very collaborative, and their problem solving has been so valuable for all of us. To see things sometimes through a different lens, and it's so helpful. So we asked them to be here tonight as well, so that we could kind of walk the board through what we have been envisioning. Now, keep in mind, this would be for if our hours did not count. We are still in the process of working with the Department of Education on those hours. Our permission, we filled out our form through CASA. Our permission for our phased in hybrid approach was denied, but we continue to work with them. We have been emailing back and forth plans, questions that they've had for us, and so determining if those hours would in fact still count. So I don't want to say that the hours aren't going to count, but what we want to do is have a plan B in the event that, or even a plan C in the event that it doesn't happen, that those hours count. So that's what we're going to kind of walk through tonight. I'm going to ask Dr. Hawkins and the 3 union leaders that are with us tonight to speak to that.
Would you like me to present now, or would you prefer to have the union members speak first, Superintendent Reisner?
Go for it.
Okay.
I think you're doing it. We didn't rehearse this, so
yeah,
there's no rehearsal.
I'm going to share my screen then, so I can share with the board document that's intended to help us know the lay of the land, if you will, mathematically with where our hours are at right now.
And then Eileen, Scott, Charlene, feel free to jump in at any point, or even now if you have anything that you want to add.
Right. I don't know why it's not giving me the option. Oh, well, that'll work. Can you guys see my screen now and see the options for 1,080 instructional hours? Is that visible to all of
Yes.
you? Okay,
Yes.
very good. Okay, so again, as Superintendent Reisner indicated, we've worked a couple of different times actually with our union in order to get to the place where we are today regarding the use of days and hours in order to meet our requirements to the state. So I'm just going to kind of go over some broad information as far as time is concerned in our calendar, present to you the options that have been discussed and I believe agreed upon. In fact, I'm confident agreed upon with the union, and then maybe take the questions the board has or turn it over to the union. So under the model that we've chosen, the instructional day that we've outlined for students is 6 hours and 10 minutes. So whether they're at home in a 100% online model, whether they're coming face-to-face or whether they're doing the remote portion of their hybrid experience, 6 hours and 10 minutes of instruction is what we have planned for each and every day. I would point out that means that when they're on site, they're actually on site for 6 hours and 40 minutes. That's that instructional day plus 30 minutes for lunch, right? We got to make sure we feed everybody. So the school day is a little bit longer than the instructional day, but for the purpose of this conversation, knowing how many hours and minutes we get out of our instructional day is key. Again, as discussed with the union, we've decided to do a few different things. You can see an asterisk next to this 164. I'm just going to scroll my screen. I apologize if I do that too fast. But 164 days built into our current calendar now. And again, this will need to come to the board for approval. So this is a proposal at this point, but those proposed 164 days would be accomplished by converting all district professional development days. That would be October 5th and January 18th to student contact days, as well as converting fall and spring parent-teacher conferences to regular instructional days. So in other words, instead of having the day off to prepare for parent-teacher conferences, teachers would teach. Instead of having a day off in flexing for parent-teacher conferences, teachers would teach. The trade-off would be that we wouldn't have those normally scheduled parent-teacher conferences. So think of not necessarily having the traditional fall and spring parent-teacher conference days, but just having them be regular instructional days. So those are some of the conversations that have occurred with the union that get us to 164 student contact days. Now that 164 does not account for any single time in that phased in hybrid model. So 0 hours coming from those 4 weeks. So if we take the 164 instructional days that are built into our calendar no matter what, and we take it times the number of instructional hours and minutes that we've already decided for our students, you can see that built into our calendar, no matter what happens, assuming, again, I should say, assuming the board approves the calendar as discussed with the union, assuming those things, you can see we have 1,011 hours and 20 minutes of instructional time built into that calendar. And again, we need to get to 1,080 hours. That's a difference of 68 hours and 40 minutes. So I have a few kind of scenarios, if you will, for how do we get those 68 hours and 40 minutes. The first scenario is really based on the idea, what if we get 0 hours, no credit at all, for the partial time that our students are coming to school face-to-face during the month of the phased-in approach? And again, as Superintendent Reisner said, that's not a certainty at all. We're working with the Department of Education right now to try to get credit for hours. But we do know that the DE has denied our application to give us credit for all of those hours. So we're either going to be at 0 or someplace in the middle, pending other options. So this, again, this box here is based on the idea, what if we don't get anything out of that phased in approach that we can count? The two primary strategies that were discussed with the union that I'm presenting here, one, we did discuss adding time each week, first semester, to the calendar of conferences, knowing that we were taking some conference time away. In the previous decisions, there was a discussion of adding some conference time. If we added 1 hour each week, that would add 16, excuse me, 16 hours of time to first semester. And again, conference time does count as instructional time. So then we just did the math of it and said, okay, if we need to make up 68 hours and 40 minutes, and we make up 16 of those hours first semester through conferences, how many minutes do we need to add to the day second semester in order to make up that missed time? And the discussion was to add that as instructional minutes, not necessarily as conference minutes. That was the discussion with the union on Friday. And you can see here, based on the math of it, we would need to add 33 minutes to the 97 days that we have second semester in order to get to our required amount of time. And so I put on there, like, if this was the strategy that ended up being what we needed to go with. And again, I think we all are hopeful that we won't get 0 hours in the month of September. But if this is the strategy we have to go with, I put what that daily schedule would look like at the building level. I'm going to pause now, since I've kind of thrown a lot at you already, and just see if there's anything that needs clarifying before I go to the next scenario, if you will.
I don't need clarity, but can you, so that we're all coming at this from the same information standpoint, can you refresh us of what each of our buildings' hours were last year? So what was the high school start time, end time? I just put you on the spot, but we've got a high school teacher and a middle school person.
Yeah, fortunately,
I can go
think
for
we
the high
have
school.
those reps here on the meeting. Maybe they could do a better job. I apologize. I felt like I was pretty well prepared tonight, but I missed the mark there. I apologize.
Jeff, I had kids at all those levels and I still can't say it. So
Okay,
you're
all right.
on that one.
So the high school day last year was 7:50 to 3:05 for students.
The elementary day was 8:25 to 3:30.
Middle school was 8 o'clock until 3:15.
Thank you.
And just as on behalf of the union to say our support, we understand that conferences are really important to have. But another thing I would mention in our rationale is this would allow, if we did conferences a little bit every week, this also allows for more in-time conferencing as well. Instead of a big build-up to 1 week, this gives teachers time to do smaller sections of conferencing and contact students or contact parents of students, maybe in a more timely manner, especially when this year is going to be so different.
That was where my question was. Could someone explain what those conferences and that style look like to parents?
Well, the one conversation that we did have with the union was those conferences and the expectation for those conferences may look a little bit different than what they have in previous years, particularly at the elementary level was the conversation. So they may not be about sharing quite as many artifacts. Beyond that, I don't want to guess necessarily at what those buildings would decide to do with those conferences, and I certainly would trust building leaders and their teachers to figure out the best way to manage those conferences. So I'll let the teachers who are here, if they wish to take a stab at that. But I wouldn't want to say something here that it ultimately ends up micromanaging how the buildings do their conferences.
So our hope was at the elementary level that, just to echo what Jeff Hawkins said, is that we would really like to be able to meet with parents on a timely basis and not be working up to one 20-minute meeting in November and March. So we would have an hour in our schedule outside of the student school day that we would be emailing or calling or even doing virtual calls with parents. So we feel like at the elementary, well, at all three levels, that we would have time with parents that would be more in the moment, if you will, and less like preparing for this big meeting where you're rushing through a lot of data. A lot of times at the elementary level, students are growing and learning very quickly. And so as you're collecting data, by the time you have conferences, that data may have even changed. And so if we're having these conferences on a weekly basis with parents, then when I'm talking to a parent about data, it's going to be data that is like real time, if you will.
And I would,
It's just it's just an observation, but I think given how the spring semester ended and how we're starting the year, perhaps it is, I mean, intentionally we're doing this, but perhaps it is the best route to take. So just to start talking to the parents sooner than waiting around. So in a way, to me, it does make more sense than waiting till November.
And just to clarify too, the way that gives us more instructional time is this hour of conferencing a week is inside the teacher contract day. So that's why we don't need a compensation day to make up for that. But it's outside the school or the student day. So it adds an hour a week during our contract time that already exists.
and then just also one other thing that I want to make sure people understand is that we still are going to be meeting with every parent remotely before school begins. So I feel really good about this plan. And one of the things that we talked about during the meeting, Director Colton, was very much what you were talking about. This really seems like a very good plan, and we need to monitor it throughout the year because this might make more sense in terms of how we communicate with parents in the long run than just during this time of a pandemic. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
If there aren't other questions, I would like to walk you through that second scenario, if you will. Oh, I see that I didn't gray those boxes to make the formatting. I've got a few things that I could have spruced up a little bit on the formatting and whatnot. I apologize for that. But
Dr. Hawkins, can I interrupt you real quick? Just a couple high-level points of clarification. So last year, in years past, when our teachers were doing parent-teacher conferences, those hours counted towards our total. So
Yes.
they always count towards it. You're just shifting when those hours happen in the school year.
yes, the
Okay.
conference hours always count towards our total. That's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay, and then do we, and this is super high level, do any of you know the average number of hours that we have typically had the past 2 or 3 years in our school calendar? Because we've had in the past, when was the awful winter? 2 years ago, that we had enough hours already in our calendar that we didn't have to make up school days. So we had more than 1,080. Am I correct in remembering that?
You are
Superintendent Meissner?
absolutely, yep, you are absolutely correct. One thing is that we knew into this year, because we shortened our instructional day, that we were going to be butting up right on the 1080. So we intentionally shortened our instructional day to give more time for teachers to prepare because they're teaching in a whole new environment. So that is one of the main differences in comparison to what you're talking about years in the past.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. And you're really challenging my memory banks here, President France, and I calculated it earlier. If it's acceptable, I would tell you I'm confident that we had somewhere between 60 and 80 additional hours in our previous calendars, but I don't know that I can remember exactly the number anymore.
That's okay. I just know 2 years ago, we had several snow days and we didn't have to make them up because we had so many extra hours into our, factored into our calendar. So I want our families to understand that even though hours don't count, may not potentially count, there's still instructional benefit, and we wouldn't be long on hours like we have been in the past if we have this. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and again, I think the point that Superintendent Reisner made is particularly pertinent, and that we made a conscientious decision. Again, when I started at top with 6 hours and 10 minutes of instructional time, that was a very conscientious decision to give our teachers that time, that a little bit of time each day to be able to balance the needs between their in-person students and their remote students in that hybrid model. And so knowing that relatively quickly we will get into that model, or we may get into that model where we're at 50% all the time, this is that shorter school day is a safeguard to make sure that teachers have that time set aside so that they can focus on both aspects of their teaching. So let me go through that last scenario there for you. What if we get 49 hours and 20 minutes? And as you can tell by the title, it's not just randomly chosen. I'll explain where 49 hours and 20 minutes comes from. But what if what if the state were to tell us that amount of time does count during the phased in hybrid? What then would we need to do to make up the additional time that is needed? So let me start with 49 hours and 20 minutes. So we've outlined the logic that I'm going to explain to you now to the state of Iowa, and they have said, yeah, we agree, that makes some sense. But the person who said that said, I'm also not in unilateral position to tell you a yes. So I need to run that past the attorney and some other folks. And so we haven't gotten official yes, this logic will count, but that we have heard it makes sense. Okay, so here's the logic. In the code, in the state code, when you talk about counting days or counting attendance, you have to always count from your lowest school. The school that attends the least sets the bar for how many hours you have. So this is set around the idea of that lowest group, if you will, in the hybrid model, in the phased in hybrid model, which in this case right now would be group number 1, right? Because on the first day of that number 1 group, it's Labor Day, and so they don't come to school. So again, that first week we start with group number 2. So group number 1 comes each week for 6 hours and 10 minutes of face-to-face instruction. And if you think that they then also get a corresponding or a 50% reciprocal of 6 hours and 10 minutes of online instruction, that's 12 hours and 20 minutes each week for at least one of those groups. So we are trying to convince the state that each week we have each of those groups meet. It should be able to count for at least 12 hours and 20 minutes for that one group. 12 hours and 20 minutes times the 3 times that group 1 meets is exactly 37 hours. When we discussed this with the union, what we heard from them was it may be wise, both because it would increase our hours, but also because we want to see every student that first week, to have group number 1 come that first week and to forego the Wednesday planning time off. That was a suggestion that our union made. And so we also heard that from some parent questions about that in our forums. And so if we added that number 1 group back in to the rotation, if you will, of that first week, each group would attend 6 hours and 10 minutes of face-to-face and 6 hours and 10 minutes of online for 4 weeks. That 12 hours and 20 minutes times 4 weeks is 49 hours and 20 minutes. So I apologize for the length of the explanation, but I wanted to help the board and our community understand, where does this scenario come from? Why would Jeff just randomly pick 49 hours and 20 minutes? That's where that math comes from. So if the state were to ultimately accept that logic and say, yes, you can count 49 hours and 20 minutes from essentially the month of September, from that phased in hybrid time, then obviously we have significantly less time to make up, right? That 49 hours and 20 minutes would take us, with what we already have built into our calendar, to 1,060 hours and 40 minutes. So we're less than 20 hours away. So what you'll see in this second box is, you could see in this row here, you can see a could be combined with. Because if we get that 49 hours and 20 minutes, we could simply, we could still add that conferencing back first semester. That was a strategy that was still discussed. Or if we only wanted to add time to second semester and not do the conferencing, that's what this math is calculated on, we would need to add 12 minutes to the day. And then, of course, there's all sorts of variations. What if we wanted to add conference time, but not as many hours? What if we wanted to, add conference time and then how many minutes? What if we didn't want to add any conference time, but yet we wanted those 20 hours to be divided by all 164 days? There's a lot of what ifs, but my point is primarily that if the state does count this time, we have much more flexibility. We have many more options, and none of our days have to really get more lengthy throughout the year than our intentional process. All right, again, I'm going to be quiet and take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Hawkins. I would add as well that from the teacher standpoint and continuity for this whole process of that phased and hybrid, we really would hope you consider putting group 1 into that first week of 4 days, because as we think as teachers about planning weeks of instruction, to have one group always be 1 day behind, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it really can be a big deal. Plus, it is more favorable in how the hours might work out for us.
I would just agree that with that statement, and then add to that at many of the elementary forums, that question was asked by parents repeatedly. If we could please figure out a way that every group could come to school that first week.
And we don't see any problem with it from a district standpoint. So we're in total support of that.
The only thing that I think might be wise to clarify, at least it was discussed, or I should say it was suggested. I suggested it. I think it may throw family planning for childcare off if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, because then if I'm a 2, I've got to plan for childcare on a different day for week 1 than I do for week 2. So we did discuss, if we're going to add group 1 back in, it may still be wise to go 2, 1, 3, 4 just for that first week, so that we try to make it not as difficult for all of those other groups as far as planning for childcare.
Does this, Jeff, have any effect on seniors? If we end up with the one where we have to make up 33 minutes every day, can seniors still graduate on the same day that they would be planning?
Thank you, that's a great question. All of this presumes that we carry the school year through June 9th. And so the state code would say that we are not able to dismiss seniors any further than 5 days prior to the last day of school. So we probably would have some work to do with the state, both on those seniors and ensuring that they can get credit for those hours, as well as how do we accomplish graduation ceremony when the date for release is maybe later than the date that we've booked Hilton Coliseum. I appreciate that question. To be really frank with you, we haven't spent a lot of time on that contingency yet.
So looking ahead in the school year, and I know we're talking about the metrics in a little bit. Our metrics are different than a little different than what the state of Iowa has provided. So if we were to find ourselves in a place that we felt like we needed to be online only, those hours we would be in a place that we would have additional hours that may need to be recouped if we are not approved by the state.
Yes, so I can speak to that. So I think that what's really important is to understand, and I think this lays it out tonight, that the 4 weeks isn't, we are able to work within our system and recoup those hours fairly easily. And maybe even look at adding a new practice that we may find works really well. I don't, so I that piece of it, I think is kind of taken care of. We feel confident about this. The union feels, I'm going to speak for the union here, but I think it's okay to say the union feels really confident about, we feel like we have a great plan. So we're, that's kind of off the table. We know seniors are going to graduate, everything's moving forward. I think a bigger issue and why it's so important for us to have the continued discussion with the state of Iowa, because the metrics that we need to go by are not the metrics that the Department of Education put out. To ensure safety of our students, we need to use a different set of metrics. Because we know that if we go with that set of metrics, we won't have teachers left in classrooms to teach students. We spent the first half of our day today trying to problem solve around what happens when a student or a teacher is quarantined, or what happens when a teacher is sick. And we're facing significant shortages of teachers. And so the conversation is really much broader than, and I really think it's important not to get lost in the first 4 weeks, because the first 4 weeks, we've got that. What's a bigger issue is what's going to happen when we need to move in and out of different models because of our local metrics that we believe are the best for students and staff. So that, I think, is where we really need to continue to push at a legal and state level. And we're prepared to do that. We're supportive of that. And I feel like our conversations with the teachers union would also indicate they're supportive of us doing that. So I hope that what you hear from me is we've got this first 4 weeks handled. But like you said, President Franzen, it's that time when we get to those metrics when we're going to need to take action that isn't action that would be approved.
Have you considered adding that time to first semester as well, to have a little bit more room? Have you talked about that?
Sure, I can speak to that, because the idea of delaying it to second semester is, again, to allow that end of day time to really let teachers settle in and learn how to do this work. So it makes a bigger change for a second semester, but we feel like in the end, for 2 reasons, it gives us more time to front load. And if we are awarded some hours, then we wouldn't need to add as much on. So we don't necessarily, look to wanting to change something like that in the middle of the year, but think that in this case, it takes into account the primary reason that the extra time was allowed for teachers in the first place.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I appreciate you adding that, Eileen, because one of my concerns as I participated in 3 different levels of building meetings last week, which, man, you all did a great job with all of those. That was a lot to take in for all of our families. But one of the things I was struck by is we know it is going to be a tough year for all of you. And just because you are managing a lot of things. And so I appreciate you sharing the importance of that additional planning time to provide that support. I know our initial hybrid model, that was what I think was so appealing about it, having students in school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, so you could have that day on Wednesday to balance the different demands on you as educators. So I appreciate that you help us understand the value of that additional time on each of your school days. So thank you for sharing that. I do have one question. This change in conferences, I heard Superintendent Reisner say it might be something that we want to look at for a permanent change. Let's say they let us have all our hours. Would you want to say, well, no, we like this new plan with conferences? I'm just curious if you're, how you're feeling about that conference time.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and one that I said in our last meeting. I really am wanting to watch how this goes. I know, having been an elementary teacher, so I can speak on the elementary end of it. I certainly would have loved this opportunity for the very reasons that we talked about when we had the meeting. It gives that in time ability to conference and to be able to share information on a regular basis with parents. It makes sense. So I don't know if there's any of the teachers that would like to speak to that as well.
Yeah, I think as an association, we surveyed our membership, and we would look at doing some more surveys and or discussions with teachers to see how they like this model and what we might do differently moving forward, because we know we've had the same model for a long time, which doesn't mean that it's a poor model. It just means that we've had it for a long time. And there are certainly times to revisit what that might look like.
Thank you for sharing that.
I would add just one other thing, and appreciation for the administration working with this on us as well, because one thing that was really concerning to teachers right off the bat when we're thinking that our hours might not be counted is this calendar would also put a start and a stop for teacher work time. So our first day is tomorrow, August 25th, and then the last day the teachers will be contracted would be June 10th. So in a year when there's going to be a lot of nimbleness required of us, we do appreciate knowing like this is our start and our stop, and then these are the things in the middle that we're going to work through and adjust to make sure that we meet the needs of our students as best we can.
I like to thank you for being so resourceful and work as a team. I think we don't always get to have the all-star team union rep. So thank you. And please send the thank you back to the teachers for their flexibility and for doing for the best thing that they can for our students. So thank you for working on this. And I think it's great. And I would be interested to see what happens with conferences.
It feels to me like the conferences would be much more teacher friendly too, where you're not, cramming so much into that time, working so many long hours just to try to get through 20 minutes at a time. So I'm really excited to see how everybody feels about it after.
I just thought of a question, and I don't know if this is for the union reps or the district, but when we talk about instructional contract hours for the teachers, will the teachers have to do, for those hours to count, will they have to be in the buildings? Or if they're teaching online, can they be home? How are we working that piece?
Yep, great question. So teachers who are teaching online or that are teaching remotely, they count. So those hours count contractually for the contract. Absolutely. And then in addition to that, we know that there may be times that a teacher has to be quarantined, but they're not ill. So the teacher would still be able to participate in conferences or staff development, or in some situations still continue teaching their class remotely. So those do count.
So will the teachers, if the teachers are teaching remotely, will they have to be in the buildings?
No, well, I should say that depends. Let me say, like everything, that depends. If it is a teacher that's quarantined, no, they won't be in the building. Of course not. And then Dr. Hawkins, I don't know if you want to speak to or even.
Well, we have some staff members, of course, who have requested an accommodation for their own personal health, or maybe the health of a loved one, childcare, those types of reasons. And we've been working through trying to make that work. And so many of those staff members that have requested an accommodation will be able to fulfill their contractual responsibilities without necessarily coming onto campus. They may be teaching our remote students. It's actually working. Remember, many months ago, we said to you, we really hope that this aligns. And for the most part, it's aligning pretty well. There are other staff members, of course, who will be managing kind of that remote part of the hybrid. And of course, they will be coming to campus because they'll also have students on campus every day. So the majority of our staff members will be coming to campus to deliver their instruction, primarily because the majority of our students are coming to campus, and the staff members are going to have some group of kids in front of them every day. So even though our kids might be spending 50 to 75% of their time online, our staff really need to be on site for the kids that are on site. There are a few staff members that will be able to do their work remotely, but that's not, I would say, the norm.
Thank you for hopping in
Thank
on
you.
that, because I wasn't sure. I didn't work on the staffing piece of that. So I appreciate you hopping in on that.
Thank you. And the meetings for staff, will they be in person or will everything be still Zoom?
That will be Zoom, yeah, or Google Hangout, whichever, but it'll be remote.
And Jeff, sorry, my phone cut out right at the moment you were answering my question earlier. I just wanted to be clear. Nothing about either of these plans, or even really the phased hybrid, is delaying when seniors would graduate, correct?
No, no, nothing about the phased hybrid will delay when students graduate, and nothing about either of these two options will delay when students graduate. What may delay, what may impact when seniors are done is the fact that we pushed back the start of the school year, right? And so
yeah, exactly.
by not beginning on tomorrow, the 24th, we start later. And so that will, just kind of has the dominoes fall down the line, right? When we start later, then we end later. And that will include with our seniors as well, at least a little bit later. And again, I appreciate the question so that I can make sure that I'm vetting that issue with the state a little bit on, because I obviously we want to make sure that our seniors get the number of hours needed in order to earn credit, right? And so I hadn't vetted that question very thoroughly, so I'll work with the state on that as well as we work with them on what credit we do get for September.
Okay. And the reason I ask is because, I'm not sure about other board members, but definitely I'm really happy with the work you put into this and the details you have here. But I just want to, my expectation is pretty straightforward. I just want to make sure we can cover these hours with no additional days and no impact to students graduating or certifications or whatever, and without overburdening the teachers. And, that's why it's great to have the union on here. I think the answer is that we're in good for all of those. But I just want to, be sure that we're covering that. So thank you.
Yes, I want to be super explicit because I know you heard some hesitation in my voice, right? Right, that's pretty obvious. Yes, we can make sure that students get the education they need, that hours get credited, that all that we can assure everything that you just said. The only thing I couldn't make a promise with, which is where you're hearing hesitation in my voice, is that we can get that done in order to have a graduation ceremony at Hilton Coliseum on May 25th. So I know we already have a contract with Hilton and we already have a date selected, and I don't know that date for the ceremony is going to work. My hesitation is not about the credit. It's not about the hours. It's about the ceremony.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I
Thank
want
you.
to,
Thank you for clarifying that, Dr. Hawkins, because I was trying to scramble and read my notes from your answer before. So I appreciate you clarifying that for us, because that has been a very valid question of what is this experience like for seniors. So thank you for clarifying that.
All right, if we are, I don't want to rush the conversation. If we're ready, you know what?
we definitely,
Not
yeah,
my place. I'm sorry. Do you want me to
Nope.
stop sharing?
yes, I think we're good. We're in a good place.
I'm taking that as in you don't have any more information to present on the calendar. Is that what you're saying, Superintendent Reisner?
That is. I mean, we can stay here for a while.
No, I'm not desiring that, just to fill time. So, okay, so no more information. Board members, any more discussion or questions from you?
I'll be
I
grateful
think the
for
only
better
thing I,
conferences.
Sorry, Monique, I didn't hear you.
I said I'll be happy for better conferences.
Thank you.
I think the only concern I have, and I think we've discussed it earlier, and there's not much we can do about it right now, but we are kind of, we're taking all of the excess cushion that we had, and that will put us in a tough spot if something does go really bad in the community, which I hope it doesn't. But I think it's probably the right move to do, because all of us have the desire of getting all the kids in the schools and keeping it there in a sustainable way. And we can't do that unless we get it right from the beginning. So
I just want
any
to,
additional.
yeah, thank you so much. I just want to take an opportunity really quickly, because what I heard you say earlier, it reminded me what an incredibly difficult task this was, and how I don't know of any other team that I've ever worked with that could have rose to this. What I heard you say, Director Beerbaum, was, I don't care if, basically at the end of the day, do this phased in hybrid, but don't extend the school year, and don't ask teachers to do more, and so if you think about that logically, we were asked to come up with a phased in hybrid approach and not extend the school year, and not extend, so I think about that set of parameters is next to impossible, but yet we pulled it off, and the team pulled it off. And that took teachers, that took principals, that took all of our staff, that took a great amount of effort and work in a short amount of time. So it just reminded me when I heard you say that, how difficult this really is and continues to be. Our work's not done. It's tough.
Yeah, you definitely have some tight constraints around you, and I anticipate there's going to be more constraints coming up. So the team's done well to pull that all together.
I really appreciate all the work also. I've been really concerned about teachers' well-being. I've been concerned about kids. So I really appreciate all the work you put into this, and that it sounds like everybody's pretty happy with the results.
Any other comments? I'm sorry, I can't see everyone's faces right now. My screen is playing tricks on me, so I can't see if you're unmuting yourself to speak. So if you want to speak any more, board members, please speak up now. But I know that you've heard from a few, but thank you for their work. I think making sure that we are managing that we are getting our students the instructional hours that they need. And I want to emphasize for our families that we typically have extra hours in the year. So even if we were to not get any instructional, any credit, so to speak, from the Department of Education, this is still very valuable instructional time with our students. So with that, I will go ahead and open to any comments from our attendees. And just as a reminder, attendees, if you would like to speak, it is on the school calendar hours, so the discussion that we just had. And if you would like to speak, go ahead and raise your hand. Eric will give you permission to speak once I see a hand. And we will hear your comments, questions, etc. Eric, I am not seeing anyone as long as you, oh, sorry, just saw one. Lauren Booton, please.
You can go ahead, Lauren. You may have to unmute.
Are you there, Lauren? Anyone else desiring to speak? Maybe while Lauren navigates her. Otherwise, Lauren, take your hand down and raise it again. Sometimes that helps. Megan Traxel, we'll go ahead and take you.
Hi there, my name is Megan Traxel. My address is 2409 Suncrest Drive. I want to start by thanking all of the teachers and administrators who did the webinars this past week. Those have been incredibly encouraging, just with the building plans. So thank you for that. I am wondering, so you're talking about hitting a point where to follow the metrics that you believe is the safest for our children, we are going to need to act litigiously to have that happen. How are parents guaranteed that that is going to work to get these hours that you're saying are going to be there in our schedule that we've now removed all of the buffer from by continuing with the phased hybrid plan?
Thank you for the question, Megan. Any staff members want to entertain the question? I think we did talk about that a little bit, and it is certainly a situation that we may be in. Next, Lauren Booton.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Lauren. Thank you for hanging with us.
Yeah, it was a settings issue. Okay.
Okay.
So I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong. So like for the middle school, for example, we have school from 8 to 2:40. Is that correct?
I don't have the screen up, so I can't affirm that. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
But Jeff, when you talked about possibly needing to add time second semester, so that could possibly be like till the normal time, so like 8 to 3:15, which is what we as teachers were contracted anyway, but it would be, or can we add, or that 2:40 to 3:30, is that already also, or to the time when we get that time for teachers, is that counted toward, that's not counted towards student contact hours?
I think what I would say is I think these are great questions, but they're questions that we can address at the building level with the building principals, so that that information is coming directly from your building principal and that you're problem solving with the building principal. So Lauren, are you at the middle school?
Yes.
I'll let Jonas know that you have some questions he can follow up with you on.
Contact him too. I just didn't know if those extra hours would fall into what would normally be in a normal year, normal time. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to the action item. And I will entertain an action. And if we can have the agenda, thank you very much for the team behind the scenes pulling up our agenda item. Go ahead, Alan.
I move the board approve the Ames County School District COVID-19 decision-making matrix as presented.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by, I think I saw Linkaitis. Did you say? Okay. Great. Discussion? Staff, do you want to
we
provide?
kind of-
Oh, go ahead, Alan. Sorry.
I mean, we kind of already said it before, and I know the board's talked about this, but I think it's just important for the community to understand why we need the metrics. The board's been clear, absolutely clear. We want to have the students back in class, unless their parents have gone for online only. We want to have them back in class, and we need a way to do that sustainably. And with Ames being a university community, we have different dynamics at play than other communities. And since Iowa State's been doing testing in mass, that's kind of dramatically skewed the numbers. So this is really our way to make sure that we can work with local health officials and make sure we can not only keep the students safe, but make sure we can have a sustainable model that lets us keep them in school, which we know we need for their mental health and education. So I just want to make sure that it's clear that's why we're doing these local metrics.
Any other discussion? All right, it's been moved by Beerbaum. Do we have everyone on here? I'm sorry, I can't see. Monique, are you here? I just can't see your.
I'm here.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to make sure I had 7 voting members. So moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Linkaitis. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Thank you. We will go ahead. I will entertain a motion now to go into closed session.
I move the board go into closed session as provided in section 21.51C of the Open Meetings Law to discuss strategy with counsel on matters that are presently in litigation or where litigation is imminent, where its disclosure would be likely to prejudice or disadvantage the position of the governmental body in that litigation.
Second.
Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Shields Cook. And board, because this is a roll call, please give your answer. I will go around my screen. Perez,
Aye.
Linkaitis,
Aye.
Colton,
Aye.
Shields Cook,
Aye.
Beerbaum,
Aye.
Benkin,
Aye.
Franzen, aye. I'm sorry, I got everyone right. Yep, okay, passes 7-0. We will go ahead and go into closed session.
see who we're missing. Elisa.
I think we're missing Monique and
Attendees.
I think Monique is the last.
do we have Jenny on here? I don't see
Yep.
her.
Yep.
Okay.
He finally let me in. I was getting worried. I sat there forever thinking, all right.
We're going to be
Monique
done
and
by,
Chris are in the attendees. They've got their hands raised.
we're going to be done by 7:20. This is going to be the earliest meeting in months.
I think
And-
Lisa.
I'm sorry, is Monique here? I cannot see her.
Yeah.
Yes, Monique is
Yeah,
here.
Monique's in.
Here.
Okay, there we go. All right. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Perez, seconded by Beerbaum. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice
Thank you,
evening.
everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks.